So, what gave you the idea for Elixir?
I am on the Rails core team, which is a web framework. And back in 2007, 2008, they released the new Rails version, which was Rails 2.2. And one of the big things in this Rails version is that it's now thread safe. And the whole idea of being thread safe was at that time, the community, the developers, like Rails users, everyone was noticing that our computers are not getting any faster because, if you remember, like it was common for us to have like a machine with 1 gigahertz, and then a little bit later you would get a machine with 2 gigahertz, and you were getting faster. But today it got stuck around like 3 gigahertz. They noticed that things are not getting faster anymore. And what started to happen is that our machines, they start to have like 2 cores, 4 cores, 8 cores. And what this means is that the way we were writing software at that point needs to change because our machines are not magically getting faster anymore. They are starting to have those cores, and we need to program in a way where we can use all of those cores that we have in our machine. So there was this need for change, and the developers in the Rails core team, they kind of saw the importance of that. They said, okay, so we need to guarantee that you can get Rails and run with all of your cores, and that's going to work. So that's the idea of thread safe. Threads are an abstraction for using all cores in your program, and meaning it's thread safe that things aren't going to break when you do that. That was like 2007, 2008, and a couple years later, I joined the Rails core team, and I kind of noticed that Rails was not really thread safe. People were reporting issues that would just happen when their application server was under high load and so on. So, when I started to work there, people were reporting those bugs, and it was actually very hard to fix those bugs because they would show up just under some specific conditions. And eventually I said to myself, like, if multi-core, like if our machines are just going to get more and more core, and this is going to be just more and more important in the future, we need to have like better tools to do this kind of job. So after I kind of decided that, I said, okay, so I need to go out and study other languages and see what other communities, what other developers are doing. And eventually, I stumbled with the Erlang virtual machine, and you're here at the Erlang event, and I really liked the virtual machine about everything it was designed for. It was designed by Ericsson, which is a telecommunication company. And when they designed it, they have like very distinct use case in mind because as a telecommunication company, they're building like telephone switches, right? And when you want to call someone, that is connected through a bunch of telephone switches. And if you are a telecommunication company, you want to build a telephone switch that's going to handle as many connections as possible and as many people talking at the same time, right? You want to be efficient. You don't want to build a machine that's going to connect just few people, right? You want to have as many as possible. So it had this idea of like concurrency, like there are a lot of people talking at the same time. It also had this idea of distribution. You can stay here in the United States and I can call back home in Poland, right? And it's going to pass through a bunch of machines. They are all talking to each other. So this whole thing fascinated me, and I went to study more about the Erlang language that runs on this Erlang virtual machine. And the way I like to describe it is that I liked everything I saw, but I hated the things I didn't see there. So I felt like there is kind of a gap here, and I can bring some of the tools that I had, for example, in Ruby or that I saw in other programming languages during this study. And that was when I had this idea of, no, okay, let me try design my own language that is going to use this wonderful virtual machine, but bring constructs and bring tooling that I saw everywhere. And that was kind of how Elixir was born.
That's so crazy. I learned so much just now. Can you elaborate on how Elixir is empathetic to users?
Oh, yeah, so this was actually a blog post that came out by Drew Olson like a week ago. And it was a really nice blog post because he was saying that Elixir is a empathetic programming language. And it was not my idea, I was not the one who came up with this term. But in the blog post, it was really interesting because Elixir is a functional programming language. And although functional programming language is gaining more and more traction in the last years, it is still very different from the main languages that we use today, like Ruby, Python, Java, C. So when you come to Elixir, being a functional programming language, you need to learn new things. So in Python we have like while loops for doing iteration. But in Elixir we don't have that. We have recursion, so it's a different way of thinking. In Python we have like mutability, but in Elixir everything is immutable by default. So you need to change the way you're going to think about software, and that already requires like adjustment from the developer side. But not only that, when you go to Elixir, it's not only about to be a functional programming language, but you also need to learn how to build concurrent software if you want, to use all those wonderful things that I was telling that the virtual machine gives to you. And the virtual machine is also about building distributed applications and about building robust applications. So if you go back like to the telephone switch case, sometimes you need to go in the middle of nowhere, right, to install a telephone switch because you need to connect two cities. And you want to install that once, and you don't want to go back there every 2 months to give maintenance, right? Because it's a faraway place. So you want to have something that's going to be running for a long time. And those are all things that you need to learn when you come to Elixir. What the blog post was about is that, there's a lot to learn in that. And he was saying that he learned a lot in the last 1 year that he was doing Elixir, but he never felt that the language put more on him than he could take, right? The language was never putting him on a lot of pressure. He always felt that he was growing as he needed, and the language was guiding him to grow when he needed and to learn the abstractions when he needed. So he felt that it was empathetic, it was not putting any burden on him. And that was very, very interesting because one of the things that when we were designing the language, so I have a company, Platform Attack, I'm one of the partners and co-founder, and we are a consultancy. Today we are about 30 to 40 people. Oh. And when I was designing the language, I knew that, if this is eventually going to work, I want my team to use it, right? And so I knew that I had to focus a lot about the getting started experience. I knew like it needs to be easy to get started with the language and start your first project, and we should not put a lot on you at that first moment. I also knew that we need to have very good documentation. So there was always some effort on making everything clear, on making like a very good path for you to learn. But that was a very good way that Drew saw it, like it was being empathetic to the users, and you could grow as you need.
Is this the first language that you've made?
Oh yes, so this is the first language that I designed. So when you are creating a programming language, there is some common like tools and patterns that like steps, because a programming language is text, right? And it needs to go through a bunch of steps until it becomes the 1 and 0s that the machine understands. When it comes to designing and taking my own decisions on how I think that should work, it's definitely the first time. What helped a lot is that I was saying like I'm in the Rails core team, and before I had already written like libraries that are used by a lot of people in the Ruby and the Rails community, and that it kind of gives a little bit of perspective. It's much easier in the sense that I'm not designing a language, just designing a library, so you have a bunch of constraints in there, but you still you already start considering like what is the best API, what is the best way I can expose this to the users, and how this can compose, how this is going to play with the other things, and those kind of prepared in a way to when you get the moment like, oh, I want to design my own language and how that's going to turn out. But I think it's also worth mentioning that it's not that you go like, I went like design a language and it worked. So I started like the first commit to the repository when I kind of had an idea, let me play with this when I'm telling the story. I want to play with a programming language. The first commit was in kind of like January 2011, and I was playing with it for 3 or 4 months, and the first version was absolutely horrible. So it was really, really bad, and but it was really a fun process. I learned a lot, and eventually, after like this first prototype that was really, really bad, I went back like to work and working on projects, but I never stopped thinking about it. Like, oh, how if I change this thing then in that prototype, how would things look like? And then just 1 year later, I actually, I think I found the proper pieces that I wanted to have in the language, and then I started everything from scratch, and then we get what is Elixir today. So in a way, we could say that's my second try at a programming language, but because it was always under the same repository, it's kind of like it's still the same, but that version we had there, that prototype, is completely different from the one we have today, and there was a lot of lessons learned, and how we can do things different, and how can we learn and can adapt and put those different poses together, because it's a lot like kind of like a Jenga game, in the sense that all the pieces you have in a language, they need to fit well together, so you need to be very careful on how you play it. And I was telling you about the decisions, right? There are a lot of decisions you need to take, so you need to be sure that they fit well, otherwise you're going to take a piece and then everything can fall apart, and you need to think about that. And I think it's what plays a lot on the language design, is exactly what you put in, and not only that, exactly what you leave out.
So you have like right now your Elixir that you're using is kind of like Elixir 2.0.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. I hope nobody. I think some people even play with the old one, but I hope that nobody really used it, because it would be embarrassing. I mean, everything is in the repository, so if they want to go at the very beginning, the history is actually there. I don't recommend anybody to go look at it, but it's actually there. So I kind of give you an idea of the timeline. So I did like the first commit in January 2011. And then 1 year later, I decided, okay, I think I have all the pieces that I want, or a very good idea of the foundation, and I'm going to take that forward. And it was just 1 year, so that would be January 2012, 1 year later. And it was just almost 7 or 8 months later where I released the version 0.5, and that was the first time where I said I was comfortable for other people to use it.
That's really cool. It's weird. I have to wrap my head around how that works. Are you working full-time on Elixir?
Yeah, so okay, so it's nice because the questions are fitting nicely. I just told you about this timeline. So when it was January 2012, when I said I kind of have an idea of how I want this programming language to work, so I went to my partners at a platform attack. We are 6, and I said, I have this idea of a programming language. And basically, and then it was a meeting, and I did a formal proposal. And basically what I told them is that back in January 2012, I was looking what Elixir could be. I would say, okay, it's a language that's going to focus on productivity and extensibility. And it's also a language that, for better or for worse, it has a dynamic type system, because that's how you need to do in the Erlang virtual machine. But it's also a language that focuses a lot on concurrency and distribution, because those were exactly the problem I was trying to solve when I started. So it had like those 3 characteristics. And back then, and I think up to some extent until today, there was just one other language that had those 3 main focuses and goals, which was Clojure, and is Clojure still. So I was looking at it, and I told them the issue is that Clojure, again, for better or for worse, right? There are always pros and cons. Runs in the Java virtual machine, and even if it did not run in the Java virtual machine, I thought that we need to have other alternatives, right? Because those characteristics are things that I am personally looking in a programming language. And a lot of people, they're looking exactly for those same characteristics. So it makes sense to have alternatives, right? To not be only a single one. So I said, so I think I can go and I can design this language and with those characteristics, and I think there is space, right? It makes sense, and I think that us as a company, we should bet on that. So I had this meeting, I had this proposal, and they said okay, that sounds very interesting, and we are going to bet on it. At the beginning, it was I started part-time, so I was doing projects, but half of my time was doing that. And for a long period of time, I released so I told that 7 to 8 months later, I released the version, but it was too small. It was not really gaining traction. And for this year, there is a really nice conference called Strange Loop that happens in St. Louis, and they have something called Emerging Languages Camp. So for that year, I had set as a goal to go to that place and present the language and They accepted my proposal, and it was really nice. I was able to get some feedback. 2012 finished, and it was still me like taking part of my time, probably part-time still, working on this language, and we still had no idea if we're going to get something back, right? If it is going to work out. It's a very long-term project, and it was just about in the middle of 2013 that we received like two very good news, very close to each other, which is David Thomas. So he helped a lot with the adoption of Ruby and widespread Ruby, and he sent me an email saying like, hey, I really like Elixir, and I'm planning to write a book about it. Alright, so that was really, really cool. And then he asked me like, because like I don't want to step on your toes, like in case I want to do that, and like, no, like please go ahead. About the same time, I also got an email from Simon St. Laurent. He's editor-chief at O'Reilly, or at least from the functional part of programming language at O'Reilly. And then he said, I want to, I wrote this book about Erlang, but I think it would be really fantastic if we kind of port it to Elixir 2 and talk about also what Elixir brings. And then it was like really, really great, because up to that point it was like 1.5 years that we were investing my time, and my time at the company in this programming language, and it was just us. But at the point that you have other people betting on it too, it makes a big difference. And that was the point, like you say, okay, so I guess these things is going to at least go somewhere, right? And from there, it just started, like the company started to invest more and more, so I started to work on it full time. I did not have to worry anymore because there was still a lot of pressure on me, like, is this really going to work out? And I was really worried about that. But when it got to that point, I didn't have to worry anymore, like, is this going to work out? What I started to worry about is like, okay, so when Elixir 1.0 is going to come out, and what we are going to have in this release. So it was really important because it allowed me to focus on other stuff and, get this plan and try to think about the next 1 year or the next 2 years and how you're going to get there. And I've been doing that full time, and I think I will continue to be doing that full time too. At my company, we are, because Elixir 1.0 was released last year, so at this year we said, okay, we're going to be ready because we already have like clients and companies coming at us and say, hey, let's do some Elixir project together. So now the company is not only me, but we have other people from the company learning Elixir, and we are starting to invest it in other ways. We have also launched a newsletter called Elixir Radar, so everyone can know what is happening in the Elixir community. So it's good because it's growing, and how the company is investing on it, it's growing too, and it's really, really nice.
What has been the biggest surprise to you that Elixir has given you over the years?
Yeah, there are many things. There are many surprises along the way. One thing that I've always done is that I didn't set up any expectations. So I was like kind of always prepared that it could not work. I would have to pack my things and go home, right? So you always had like surprise. So like when I got the email from David Thomas and Simon, it was like, whoa, this is a really nice surprise. I was like really not expecting for it. I kind of hoped that something like that would happen because I knew I didn't want to write a book about it. But it was really nice when I got those emails, and I could not have asked for like better writers and better people to be involved on those activities, right? But the one thing that kind of like was the biggest surprise was Elixir conference. So last year we had the first Elixir conference in July, if I remember correctly, in Austin. And I was completely not expecting about a conference. There was someone just sent an email, Jim Freeze, he's the organizer, someone just sent an email to the mailing list so everyone could read like, oh, we are organizing an Elixir conference. And I'm like, wait, what? We're already having a conference. And then again, I never tried to have a lot of expectations. So I was thinking, well, probably going to be like 40, 50 people there. But it was 100 to 110 developers for our first conference. We didn't even have Elixir 1.0 at the time, right? And that was like a big surprise. And we had a nice community. The event was great. We have a bunch of like really, really good talks. people, and I could hear from people using it in production and doing interesting stuff with it. So that was definitely the biggest surprise. And this year we're going to have Elixir conference in Europe,
Wow,
in
oh my
Krakow,
God.
and another one back in Austin in October. So it's really, really nice, and it's always good because conferences, there are also a lot about the people, right? So it's always good because sometimes we talk to a lot of people, and we talk through the mailing list or IRC channels, and we get to know everyone that we are talking kind of like through those channels, get to meet them in person, get to know a lot of people. And when you see, that as community, everyone's like building interesting stuff and running this stuff in production, that's really, really cool.
It must be so heartwarming to see all these people using something that you've made.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
But I also like to joke though, because I think that as software writers we also have responsibilities in a lot of responsibilities in general. Kind of a little bit more extreme example, but if you are like building a software, even if it's internal software that runs in the hospital, you need like to have responsibility that things are going to work because it's an important part of the infrastructure. And there we get to know like people using Elixir in important, I haven't heard story about hospital, but in important infrastructure too. So it's like very heartwarming, but in a point it can be like also add responsibilities that you're not planning to. Like, I really need to be very careful with it because now there's like a lot of people rely on it both directly and indirectly.
Thank you so much for coming in
Oh.
and talking to us today. We are so happy to have you. I hope you have a wonderful time for the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.